Okay, so this is for, well, let me start over. We are going to do 2 videos. So I can't even talk. At first, I was just going to do one, and it would be the second one that you guys have to watch anyways. But now that we had the class pictures and we ran out of time. So here would have been the notes that we were supposed to take yesterday. So if you can get me to the next blank page that you have, we have to start looking at physical and chemical changes. So for us, will you give me a date of 2/28, because that would be the date for today. And then will you give me a heading that says physical and chemical changes? Sorry. If I start writing too fast, then you just pause me, you write what you need to, and then when you're good, press play and keep going. So the real difference, I have to grab a highlighter really quickly. The big difference would be that physical changes you can fix and chemical changes you can't. So once they're done, they're done. So I'm going to write 3 things under physical changes, and then I will write a couple of things under chemical changes, and then we'll move on to the next video. So this is going to say that a physical change is a change in appearance only. So a physical change is a change in appearance. It's APPEARANCE only. And all that really means is that the item looks different, but it's still the same item. I'll give you an example in just a second. I'm going to write down the item looks different, but it's still the same item. And then when you're good, I need you to highlight this whole last sentence for me. A physical change makes the appearance, the way something looks, different, but it doesn't actually change the entire item. So it would be if you went and you got a terrible haircut and you hate it. The good news would be that in a few weeks, it's going to start to grow back out and it's not going to be as bad anymore. If you ripped a hole in your jeans, Mom could fix them. She could get a patch and she could sew it and it could be fine. Or if you rip a hole in your backpack, okay, you could put a patch on it, you could sew it, it could be fine. Things that you can fix. It would be the whole reason that erasers exist. Because I could erase if I had made a mistake and fix what I need to fix, okay? A physical change changes how something looks, but the item remains the same. I'm going to write down that physical changes can be reversed. And then after reversed, in parentheses, I'm going to put fixed, because that's what that would mean. You can reverse them, you can fix them. They're not a permanent thing. I'm going to skip a line, and I'm going to put some examples here. Here we go, it's very fuzzy. Getting a haircut is an example of a physical change. If you rip or cut paper, or really anything, you could fix it because you could tape it or glue it back together. If you've ever had a piece of chocolate melt, and you still licked that melted chocolate off your hand anyways, okay? Something melting is a physical change. Because if you've ever had a piece of chocolate melt in your hand and you still licked it off your hand anyways, it's still chocolate. It's just melted. It's still the same thing. It just looks different. The same way, though, if you've ever made your own popsicles, if you've taken juice and you've put it in the little popsicle mold and you've stuck it in the freezer, it still is the juice contents that you use to make the popsicle. It just looks different now. Honestly, water evaporating is a physical change because all it is a liquid turning into a gas. But then it could go through condensation and it could become a liquid again. If you've ever been eating something and you've left crumbs behind, that is a physical change. Okay, if you bite into a bagel and some crumbs fall onto your plate, it still is a piece of a bagel. It just looks different. It's not the whole bagel anymore. It's just the crumbs. If you've ever cracked an egg, there would be no point for you to put it back together, but until you do something with the egg, it's just a physical change. The big thing about physical changes is that you can fix it. You're not making anything new. You're just changing the way that something looks. So one more thing that I'm going to write here, and I'll skip one line. It's going to say, in a physical change, we are not, and I'm going to write not in capital letters, and I'm going to underline it. We're not making anything new. You're just taking something and you're making it look different. I'm going to highlight this whole sentence. Oops. If I pushed over the entire caddy and everything fell onto the floor, it would just be a physical change. Because it would still be the whole caddy and all the stuff in it. It would just look different because I've knocked it over. If I shoved the chair off the table, it's a physical change. Because I could easily pick everything up and put it back into the caddy, or pick the chair up and put it back onto the table. You're just taking something and you're making it look different. But it's still the same item. Everything's still the same. It just looks a little bit different. Underneath here, I need you to give me a line. And then I'm going to give myself a heading here that says chemical changes. Where in a physical change, you can fix it. Okay, it can be reversed. It's still the same thing, it just looks different. A chemical change, you've made something completely different. You've changed it to the point where you can't change it back. So I'm going to write down that a chemical change forms a new substance. And I'm going to underline new. And I'm going to add that it forms a new substance with different properties, which means you're completely changing it. A chemical change is where a change forms a new substance with completely different properties. The big thing about a chemical change is that the change is completely permanent. You cannot fix it. So I'm going to move up to the top. If you need me to slow down, then you pause, you write what you need to, and you'll press play when you're ready. I'm going to add, when a chemical change occurs, the change is permanent, which means you cannot go back and fix it. I'm going to write permanent, in big capital letters, and I'm going to take up 2 lines to do it. It is PERMANENT. So when a chemical change occurs, the change is permanent. Underneath permanent, in parentheses, I'm going to write that means you can't fix it or change it. Once it's done, it's done. I'm going to take my highlighter and I'm just going to highlight the letters for permanent. And if you want to draw the little arrows from you can't fix it and you can't change it back to permanent, that's what permanent means. Once it's done, it's done. There's no fixing it, there's no changing it. We're going to make a list, so signs that a chemical change are happening. So I'm going to put signs of a chemical change. And then I'm going to put 2 dots there. We're going to make a list. If something bubbles or you see smoke, more than likely a chemical change has happened, because bubbles usually signify that something is changing or something is cooking or boiling, whatever. But once that happens, you can't uncook something. If something accidentally starts to smoke or something accidentally catches fire, well, even if you put it out quickly, if I burned a piece of paper, you would be able to tell that that paper had been burned. I would never be able, even if I try to tape something, get it to be perfectly back the way that it was. If ever heat is given off or it's being absorbed, and absorbed means taken in. So if heat is given off or if heat is being taken in, then more than likely a chemical change has occurred, because heat changes things. If light is produced, if an object changes color, those are all signs that a chemical change has occurred. So we're going to list some examples. If there's a fire, if you think about if you've ever had a bonfire, okay, at your house, once you burn the wood, you can't unburn it. You're never going to be able to get those logs of wood back. So once it's gone, it's gone. A fire is a great example of a chemical change. If you're baking something or you're cooking something, if I bake cookies, I can't unbake them. So once they're made, they're made. If you bake a cake, you can't unbake it. Once it's made, it's made. And if you've ever made cookies or you've made a cake or brownies and you've accidentally left them in for too long and you burned them, there is no fixing it. You either suck it up and you eat it the way that it is, or you throw them out. You can't unburn something. Same thing would be if you're toasting something. Like if you put toast in the toaster or you put a bagel in the toaster and you accidentally leave it for too long, well, you can't fix that. You either suck it up and you eat it burnt, or you throw it out and you try again. They love to give us the example of our bodies digesting food. If you eat a piece of pepperoni pizza and your stomach acid churns it all around, even if you throw up that piece of pizza, you might see some pepperoni in your throw up, but you're not going to throw up the full piece of pizza back together again. So once your body eats, food and your stomach digests that food and it starts to move through your intestines, well, you're not going to get that thing back the way that it was. So once your body does its job and it starts digesting food, That's an example of a chemical change. Batteries, I know that they do have rechargeable batteries, but normal, regular batteries, once you use them, they're done. You can't reuse them. Rust, okay, it's a reaction to oxygen, but if you've ever left your bike outside and it rains and the metal gets wet and it starts to rust, you cannot get that rust off. Once it's there, it's there. I'm going to put rotting food. If mom's ever bought bananas and the bananas start to get the little dots on them and they start to go bad, well, if they get too far gone and then the bananas turn completely brown, you can't change that. It's either you toss them because no one's going to eat them that way and you just buy new bananas. But once it changes that color, even if it just has a few little brown dots on it, you're not going to get those brown dots off. The only other thing I want you to put is if somebody dyes their hair. If I come in tomorrow and I now have blue hair, I, yes, could dye it a different color, but that blue is going to change the way that my hair is. So even if I dyed my hair blue and the next day I dyed it back brown, the blue will still be underneath the brown. It still is changing. If there is a color change, the banana's going brown, or somebody colors their hair, chemical change. Rust is orange. It's turned a color, chemical change. Okay? Stuff like that. Anything that is permanent, that you can't just easily fix, chemical change.